us from. Welcome to another edition of Sales TV Live. Today, we're mastering the balancing act between art and science. We're joined by Jessie Molitor, Vice President of Sales at Deskera, with over 17 years of expertise in sales and leadership, also a board member of the Women in Leadership Advisory. Jessie has extensive background in leadership and development. Jessie, welcome.
Welcome. Hi, good to see you again. Nice to see everybody here.
Jessie, please tell us a little bit about you, your journey in sales, and where you are today.
Absolutely. So I currently am at Deskera. As Rob mentioned, I'm the VP of Sales here. I spent previous to this about 7 years at SAP Concur, leading sales organizations, both in client sales, new business sales. About a year and a half ago, I came over to Deskera to build out their US sales organization. And I am based out of Minneapolis. We've got a team here, small but mighty.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. So I want to jump right into it. We've all heard that sales is part art and part science. Mm-hmm. Maybe not everyone buys in, but even if we do, it means something different to everyone. What do you mean when you say that? What's the science and what's the art?
Absolutely. I 100% believe there's art and science. And I think it starts for a lot of us in the science side, right? You can look back and for those of the number of people out there, you can go back and say, okay, if I have 8 leads, I know 50% of them are going to go to sales working, which means they're going in my pipeline, and I'm going to close 25% of that. That's a science, right? If you take times that by 100, it's probably going to be pretty similar throughout. However, from the art side of it, you're going to have more effectiveness. And I kind of go back to art and science is the A times E equals R, activities times effectiveness equals results. So that effectiveness piece is the art of it. How can you move that deal faster? What are the ideas you can bring to the table? You can't bring ideas if you don't have leads, which is science. If you don't have the math, you don't have a customer, you can't close that customer. You can be as creative as you want, but you don't have the momentum to be able to actually close anything. So it's really being able to, as a salesperson, as a sales leader, understand what your business is from a science perspective, and then how can you make it more effective with the art of selling.
So when you're training, go ahead, Adam.
I was just going to say, so you talk about art, and I absolutely get that, because some people have just a natural affinity with others. Mm-hmm. So they're able to go into a room and they're able to command the room, and people just like dogs sitting up there, wanting to buy from those salespeople. And it's a beautiful thing to watch. Mm-hmm. But as a leader in an organization, those people are few and far between. There are not many of those. So is it possible to take that art, take that artistry, take that creativity, and productize it or process it in order that other people can learn? Or do they have to just watch them? Or how do you, because I'm sure often you have people that are very good at doing the math, very good at doing the process, very good at doing as they're told, but they haven't got that creative spark. So how do you spread that, or can you?
I think actually it's easier to teach art than it is to teach and maybe not necessarily easier to teach science, but it comes down to skill and will. If you have the will, you can teach anybody art. They may not have the natural charisma that someone else has, but you can teach them things to do or questions to ask and how to do that if they're willing to learn. It's a lot harder to teach people to want to do the hard stuff, which is the day-to-day process, to understand their numbers. If they don't have the want there, it's much harder. So when I'm hiring someone, I think it's more impactful to understand how coachable are they? How much are they willing to learn from the will side? Because the skill piece can be taught. You're never going to make somebody that doesn't have that natural charisma into having it. However, they can figure out how does that come out through their personal personality skill set. Everyone doesn't. I used to say when I would hire a team, it's like, you don't need 7 Jessies. You need 1 Jessie, and you need 1 Tim, and you need 1 Tony. They're all going to have different skills, but how do you help them? And that's where the art comes in. Use what they do best. But if they don't have the will, you're never going to get them there.
Mm.
So when you're training new sales professionals, which comes first?
I think it's always going to be the science, because they need to know what they need to do. And I don't know if that's necessarily teaching them, but they need to understand, if I come into a new role, what's expected of me? How do we set those expectations? And a lot of the expectations, it's hard to set expectations on the art of it. Because again, that's subjective. The science, you know what it should be. So that's easier to set expectations early, and then teaching the art. So if I'm hiring an SDR, they probably don't have a lot of the motion coming in. They don't know a lot when they're coming in. So you're teaching them the science, and as they have those at bats, they're getting more artful with it. You can help with, how do we tweak this and how do we make it better? If I'm hiring an enterprise AE, they probably have a lot of art. So again, you're going back to saying, here's the science of our business, because every business model is going to be a little different. If I'm selling an ERP solution, like I'm selling today, is very different than I'm maybe selling an SMB point solution. And so being able to say, what are those transferable skills that bringing in, starting with the science and then layering in that art piece. And some people will naturally pick it up. I think sometimes you have challenge with, I worked with leaders who will say, well, I only care about the art. I just want closers. Well, again, it goes back to, if you don't have the science, the building blocks, which is the leads, it doesn't matter if you have the best closer in the world.
Right.
And on the flip side, you can't have someone that all they do is manage to the numbers, because if we're not helping our people be more effective, again, you're going to fall short of that number.
Bob Britton shares with us, I learned to sell professionally from the U.S. Navy. Aside from commercial selling programs like Achieve Global, they had an organic program called The Science and Art of Naval Recruiting. That's interesting. Recruiting is a sales job, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So when developing a go-to-market playbook, what's the most effective blend of art and science? What are the numbers?
Mm-hmm. I had an old leader, Ben Brewer. He was a big on this thing called, we called the simple focus. So you're like, if you think about your deals, you need to know how many deals you need to close from a playbook standpoint. We all know if you're in sales, you have a quota, whatever that quota is. How do you work backwards to find the number for each of them? So if I need 1 closed deal, I know I need 4 deals in my sales working, which means I probably need 8 raw leads to get to 4 deals in my sales working. So if you start on a sales playbook, understanding and teaching your team those numbers, and then individually identifying where your teams are landing. If we're not hitting our closed one, do we have enough deals in our sales working? If not, and we look down and say, okay, well, they had enough leads, there's a skill gap there. That's where you work on the art. You work on this, where's that skill gap? And if you work backwards from the numbers, you'll start seeing where those skill gaps lie. And that's how you build your playbook. But if you start with what's expected, and then build in where those skill gaps could fall, and then address the skill gap from a coaching standpoint.
Talk to me a little bit about that coaching, because a lot of the coaching that I've observed is really all about those numbers. Hey, you didn't hit enough of these numbers. And the coaching is, go hit more of these numbers. Well, gee, I wish I had thought of that. But you've identified the gap. What does that coaching look like that helps them develop the art?
Mm-hmm. I think it's digging in with the individual. Okay, for me, it's okay, let's sit down and go, okay, we had 4 deals. We maybe, let's say we have 8 deals. We'll use the math. And we close 1 out of 8 instead of 2 out of 8. So we're closing at a lower percentage. Let's break down where in the sales process that is and hone really simply into that piece of the sales process versus trying to coach the whole deal. I think too often we look at it either from a number standpoint or say, let's listen to this whole hour-long call and give you feedback on everything. that doesn't help a rep. Let's identify where's the one point we maybe lost the customer, and let's talk through how could we have that conversation better and listen to that piece of the conversation and get that really good, and then move on to the next skill. Because you can't teach someone art as a whole of selling. You have to chunk it out in bite-sized pieces. So if it is maybe setting next steps, someone doesn't do a great job of like, they just kind of let it go. Okay, well, let me know. I'll follow up with you in a week. How do we set that and make that piece stronger so that we can say, okay, you did a great job here. Now, what else can we focus on? And if you're only looking at the numbers, you're just saying we didn't close the deal. Well, maybe we lost the deal in the discovery call or in that first meeting. We didn't lose it at the closing stage. If you're coaching to the number, you're only coaching to the closing stage. But your problem isn't the closing stage. Your problem is 3 steps prior to that.
It's really interesting that you say that. So we talk to a lot of sales functions in a lot of different companies. And the go-to bit is often that bit at the end. So the organization says, we're not closing enough business, therefore we need to retrain people on insert sales methodology here. And it's all about processing that part of the deal. And the challenge that we often find is that there's not enough stuff going in at the top of this conveyor belt. So yes, you're not closing enough business, but the problem is that the people that you are talking to at that stage in the buying process were never a good fit for you anyway. So you're closed, and because there are so few of them, you're not in a position to be able to say, you know what, Jessie, it isn't working. We're not the right supplier for you. And one of the challenges that I've actually had in a meeting with a client where I've said to them, can your sales team sell? And they go, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so why have you got no pipeline? Okay. The challenge is, and I bet, ask the team, the challenge is that you're doing loads of stuff, loads of emailing, loads of calling, loads of door knocking, and nobody wants to talk to you. Yes, that's exactly the problem. Okay, so that's the bit you need to address. There are some people, I've met you, I simply do not like you. It doesn't matter how good your offer is, how good your proposition is, how good your use case is, I'm not going to buy from you because I don't like you. And sometimes you're so reliant on that one or that two opportunities that there isn't the opportunity to acknowledge that sometimes you're just not a good fit, either personally or from a business perspective with those people. So how do you address that? How do you get people to be doing stuff that brings more stuff in you've got more raw material coming in at the start of the conveyor belt, and naturally more's going to come out at the far end?
That's 100%. That is something actually my team's been working on a lot this year is, okay, we don't need to push everyone to the end of our sales cycle. It's just you're putting people into maybe a sales working status that they're not a buyer. They don't have buying authority. So we need to be assessing our deals at an earlier stage and being okay to lose them. A lot of people will use it like you're gripping the club so tight, you're trying to close a deal that was never going to close.
Yeah.
I'm not a golfer, but you need to let go. You need to have that mindset of abundance versus a mindset of scarcity. If you had 10 deals at the beginning and you said, you know what, which of these 10 deals look really good and you could make that decision, you're getting rid of 5 of them right away. So you're not pushing those 5 to an end and then losing it and like, well, why? Well, it was never going to come in. Be realistic early on. You may have less deals in your funnel, but the deals you do have are more qualified.
I think also, the challenge is that I have a number to make. I have a number to make this quarter. You're not going to buy this quarter. Jessie, you're going to buy from me today. You're going to buy from me tomorrow. You're going to buy. And it's like you can only ask that question so many times. And I think that a lot of the problem is that people get this qualify out mindset. And, I like to think of it as I'm qualifying you now or later. I'm the right fit for you. Either you're going to buy today or tomorrow or this week or next year or in 5 years. And actually, as long as I'm putting enough people into that mindset, you can buy when you're ready. And it always makes me laugh about this idea of, customer journey mapping. It's never customer journey mapping. It's always your company sales mapping. It's always about what you want to happen. But it requires people to behave and think in a different way, doesn't it?
100%. I always call it planting seeds. When I worked at SAP, my reps would laugh at me because I'd be like, Q1, we're just planting seeds. All you're doing is planting seeds. You want to talk to as many people as possible. Not all of them are going to grow right away, but you're planting seeds now because those are going to grow in Q3 and Q4. And if you treat the deals right and you understand where they're at, not where we're selling, but where they're at in the buying process, you feel a lot better when they come back in Q3 and Q4.
So that makes perfect sense. So why do so many sales leaders have a bell that they ring? And, it's, they use Glenn Ross as a training video, and it's all about machismo and fighting, and none of it is about truly making it customer centric. So why don't more people behave the way that you're talking about?
I think it's a cultural thing. Like, I think that's how sales has been positioned. I also think, especially where we're in the market we're in right now, we're seeing that very much because 2020 through 2022, everyone was selling, everyone was buying, there was money. And so the way people could sell was a little bit different. They could be more aggressive because they had that big old funnel. And right now we're seeing it more because people's funnels aren't as big and they don't know, they've been taught to just follow the process and push people through their sales process versus meeting the customer where they're at and understanding where that customer is in their buying journey. You could, I think a good example of this is reps will throw out, okay, here's your pricing, but if you buy today, it's like, if they're not going to buy today, you're just like, they're not idiots, excuse my language, but customers know, like, okay, if you really want my deal, you're not going to take that away. So understanding when to use those levers, that's that art piece, right? Understanding where the customer's at in their buying journey, not where are you at? Oh, I did a discovery call. The next thing is a demo, and then I'm going to go through pricing. Well, does it make sense to go through pricing? They want to buy in 6 months. Maybe we understand, like, okay, what does your process need to look like? How do we meet that? And because of the pressures of sales, I think people too often just try to shove it down, shove the sale in. And that's what gives salespeople a bad name, to be honest. It's that used car salesman mentality, but what if I could do this for you today? And in the market we're in, that doesn't work.
So Bob Britton asks, do you use assessments to baseline and benchmark your sellers' competencies and attributes?
We've identified, okay, what are the sales competencies that they need to have? And I think it's different for every type of selling, because if you're selling an ERP software versus selling a point solution, there are some commonalities, but there are other things that you need to have. So I think identifying that for whatever your sales organization is, or if you're selling maybe home remodeling, whatever that might be, every industry is going to have different competencies. And identifying that. So at SAP, we had different competencies than we do here. Also, we're in a startup mode. So I think understanding where your company is at makes a difference in what competencies you need your team to have. So I don't know if there's necessarily a set baseline, Bob. I think it's you sitting down and saying, okay, go through your sales process. What are the steps that your team needs to be able to take? And what are those skills that align?
And how do you empower a salesperson to find the right blend of art and science for themselves?
I think everyone's got to have that baseline, that building block. And I used to always say, like, as you prove that you're hitting your number consistently, that baseline might change a little bit from the building blocks. So what I might not need 8 leads to get 4 to sales working. I might need 6 leads to get 3 to sales working, but I close 1 out of 3 because I close at a 33% rate versus a 25% rate. But if you can't, for me, it's show me that you understand the baseline and you earn the right to be able to make some changes to that. And that comes with consistency. It comes with proven over time. Again, it depends on what you're hiring for. If you're hiring an enterprise sales rep, you better you better have done a really good job in your recruiting and in your interview process to understand they know how to sell a deal. If you're hiring a brand new SDR, there's going to be a little bit different. I've used kind of in a couple different roles in my career, situational leadership to understand where that person is Do they understand what needs to be done? Do they have the skills to do that? And then identifying, how do you coach that person to where they're at? So if they're brand new, they're excited, but they don't know what they're doing. So you need to be a little more directive on, okay, here's how to do it. If they've done it a million times, if I direct you how to do it, you're just going to get mad. You're going to get frustrated.
So I'm interested to know, how do you as a sales leader think that sales organizations should deal with people who are abnormal in terms of how they do things? So they're kind of like Maverick. So, we often have conversations about frustration that salespeople face, where you have a number, make your number, but you're not doing any of the KPIs that the company has set for you in order to make your number. So often, and we hear this time and again, you may well have made your quota and you're 110% of target, and your boss pulls you up and says, you haven't made enough phone calls this week. And you say, but I'm the best performing salesperson you have. And they say, yeah, but some of your KPIs are emails. And so how does one change that archaic mindset? Because at the end of the day, you're not paying me to send emails, you're paying me to sell stuff. Or maybe you're not. Maybe you're paying me to send emails. Who knows?
I was going to ask along the same lines, just to use the numbers that you had in the example before. So they only had 6 in their pipeline, but the KPIs, we've said you clearly have to send this many emails, make this many calls to have this many in your pipeline, and you're not doing it. I can understand at a startup where you can have different rules for everyone, but at an enterprise organization, it seems like it's less able to accommodate. Yet you've been able to do that. How did you do that?
I think it goes back to that simple focus thing I talked about earlier. If someone's hitting their number, we're not worried about how many leads did you have. If they're consistently hitting their number, it's not a one-off. I hit it 1 month and we're good. But if they're consistently hitting their number, I'm not as worried, as long as we know it's being done ethically, about the waterfall. And that's where from a leadership standpoint, we need to start thinking about that. Is if they're hitting their number, why am I focusing on, well, you didn't have enough sales working? They're obviously closing at a higher rate. The one thing I will say, and I've had this conversation with top performers over the years, is understanding what do those people want to do from a long-term perspective. Because if that is someone that says, I want to be a leader, I just do it this way, that's someone you have to have a conversation with. That's great. You can do it that way because you have some natural ability that not everyone has. How do you set the example for the other person that does not have that? And you're going to have people that are, I'm an individual contributor, I always want to be one. Then you just say, great, let's do that. As long as you continue hitting your number, I'm not worried about X number of calls. I'm not worried about X number of emails, because you get paid on your number. But if your goal is to, I want to lead a team, or I want to do this, how does that impact other people behind you that you're going to apply for a role and say, well, I don't do that. I'm artful. You can't teach someone. That goes back to that, teaching someone that some things that are just innate skills. You can teach them to use their skills, but you can't replicate your skills in somebody else.
You do realize that's a bit of an enlightened way to lead, right?
I think you got to lead by your people first. Again, that's the art and science. You need to understand your people, and then the numbers should be directionally accurate. They're not going to always hit, but are we moving in the right direction? If you only look exactly and say, well, you made 24 calls, not 25 calls today. Yeah, but I had 4 really great conversations. Awesome. You got deals into your pipeline. I'm not as worried about that. Because someone might be making 30 calls and they're making calls just to make calls. That's right. That effectiveness. I'm checking off the box. The next person puts the energy in and makes 20 and they're more effective. Again, the end of the day, we're in sales. The number is going to show us where we are, and the rest should be directionally accurate. How are we getting to that number?
Jessie, this has been great. How can people learn more? Where can they get in touch with you?
Absolutely. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's Jessica Molitor Larson. You can email me, Jessie.Molitor@Deskera.com. And you can check out Deskera. That's my organization. If you're looking for a new ERP, we would love to chat.
Fantastic. This has been another edition of Sales TV Live. To our audience, on behalf of our guest and everyone at Sales TV Live, thank you for being an active part of today's conversation. We will see you next time. We do have a newsletter. Don't miss an episode. Get show highlights, beyond the show insights, and reminders of upcoming episodes. Scan the QR code on screen or visit us at Sales TV Live and visit the newsletter section. This has been another edition of Sales TV Live. On behalf of our panelists, to our guest Jessie, to our audience, thank you. Thank you all, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.